So we were on the show with Little Richard. Little Richard refused to go before James Brown. Would not go before him. And Miss Brown like, oh, we just gonna sit here.
Little Richard, the architect of rock and roll known for his electrifying performances and groundbreaking persona, harbored a secretive and tormented side that few glimpsed beyond his public exuberance. Behind the energetic piano keys and flamboyant costumes lay an awful secret that Little Richard carried with him for years, casting long shadows over his dazzling career. The man who set the stage ablaze with hits like Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally also fought private battles, struggling with personal demons that contrasted sharply with his public identity. What was the secret that Little Richard kept so fiercely guarded, and how did it alter the image of the legend we admired? Join us as we uncover the layers of complexity in a life as tumultuous as the era Little Richard helped define. Richard's early years were marked by some bizarre incidents. As a child, he had a peculiar sense of humor, often giving people his feces as a present. He once wrapped his poop in a box as a birthday gift for a woman. With a broad grin, he handed it to her. She, thrilled and eager, took it home to open with her friends. Observing from afar, Richard awaited her response. Upon opening it, she was appalled and screamed that she was going to kill him, yet Richard found it hilarious. This was not his only time engaging in such antics. Another instance saw him place his feces in a jelly jar, which he then stealthily positioned among his mother's preserves. Though he thought it was a splendid prank, his mother was livid upon discovering it. His family considered his actions slightly mad, labeling him as either a mischievous kid or someone who enjoyed startling others. This habit was just one of the ways Richard stood out. Physically, he was distinctive as well, with a notably large head on a small body, one eye larger than the other, and a discrepancy in leg length that made him walk with a noticeable sway. This uneven gait drew attention and ridicule from other children, who mocked his walk and even accused him of trying to walk like a girl. From a young age, he faced frequent bullying. He could perform for the white girls when he wore eyelashes and more flamboyant attire. Regardless of how he presented himself, they allowed him to sing. Despite the bullying, Little Richard did not let it defeat him. Rather, it fueled his ambition. He was determined to surpass others and demonstrate his unique talents. This drive made him intensely competitive, pushing him to excel in everything he pursued. Growing up in a large family with 12 siblings meant constant competition. To get noticed, he needed to be resilient and strong. His mother hoped that attending church would benefit him, particularly with the belief that it could possibly heal his leg. Though his leg remained the same, his time in church led to an unexpected discovery. It was there that Richard found his voice, a powerful tool unlike any other, capable of hitting notes that captivated anyone within earshot. His performances in church marked his first public singing experiences and set him on the path to stardom. Home life was challenging for Richard. His father, Bud Penniman, enforced strict rules and struggled to accept Richard's true self, especially disapproving of his long hair, makeup, and less traditionally masculine behavior. As a church deacon, Bud held firm beliefs about how boys should behave. One time, Richard draped himself in his mother's curtains, dubbing himself the Magnificent One, which only angered his father further. Rather than dismiss or laugh off the act, Bud reacted with fury and violence. He physically restrained Richard and subjected him to harsh beatings, causing severe pain and emotional distress. Richard was merely a child seeking affection but was instead met with rejection and abuse from his own father. The situation escalated when the beatings failed to alter Richard's behavior. In a drastic move, Bud expelled Richard from their home, leaving him homeless at just 13 years old. Without family support or a safe place, Richard was forced to navigate the world on his own. Fortunately, after being ousted from his home, Little Richard was taken in by a white couple, Ann and Johnny Johnson, who showed him genuine kindness. The Johnsons owned the Tick-Tock Club, a venue where Little Richard began to perform regularly, embracing the very art his father despised. His performances in this club set him on a path to musical success. The harsh rejection from his family fueled his determination to prove his worth. In a twist of fate, as Richard's career took off, his father Bud began to appreciate his son's talent. He started taking pride in Richard's accomplishments, listened to his music, and even considered buying him a car to support his touring. It appeared their strained relationship might finally mend. However, tragedy struck before any reconciliation could happen. Bud Penniman was fatally shot in his own bar by Frank Tanner, one of Richard's close friends. The circumstances surrounding the shooting were murky, with rumors suggesting it may have involved an argument about firecrackers. Suddenly, Richard lost his father under brutal and confusing circumstances. Despite Bud's prior cruelty, his death was a profound shock to Richard, adding to the complexity of his emotions. Tanner spent only a week in jail, and the full motives behind the shooting remained shrouded in mystery, leaving many questions unanswered. Richard struggled against industry racism. When I came about, everybody thought I was crazy, and they would call the music terrible and bad. Richard battled the music industry. His songs brimmed with vitality, his voice resonated with strength, and his stage presence was untamed. After you start winning with it, everybody got on the bandwagon and in the boat. Everybody started claiming the name and blaming it. Richard encountered numerous challenges within the music industry, which he felt treated him unjustly, a situation he attributed largely to racial discrimination. He observed other performers, particularly white artists, covering his songs and earning more than he did from them. A notable instance was Tutti Frutti. After Little Richard turned this song into a major hit, Pat Boone released his own rendition, which achieved even greater popularity despite widespread criticism of its quality. Richard was convinced that Boone's success was aided by his race, reflecting a broader industry bias that favored white artists, even those who imitated works by black musicians. This pattern was recurrent. Icons like Elvis Presley rose to fame performing tracks initially popularized by black artists, including Little Richard himself. This repetitive disregard highlighted an enduring inequity within the musical landscape. If I had been white, Elvis would have never been. Richard Penniman, known as Little Richard, put in a lot of effort in his career. He wanted the same level of respect given to musicians who were white. However, he saw that he was treated differently when he performed in places like Las Vegas. The way he was treated was not the same as white musicians. His hotel rooms were not as good, and he often received less money. This made him very upset, and he talked openly about it. He asked to be treated fairly, but even though he spoke up, things did not change much. The people in the music business continued to give more attention and chances to white artists. Little Richard felt that his hard work was not valued as much as it should have been. He did not keep his feelings to himself. He told people that he was the person who really built the foundation of rock and roll. He wanted the world to know that he helped to create rock and roll music, but he saw an odd thing. When people talked about a white musician, they called him the king of rock and roll. But when Little Richard called himself the king of rock and roll, people added the word self-proclaimed. He believed that this was another example of racism. He felt that the music business did not want to give him full credit for what he had done. I want you all to know that I am the king of rock and roll. A life of extremes. Little Richard led a life marked by extremes. He was famously candid about his intense lifestyle, revealing in an interview his heavy use of hard substances. I took so much, and my nose was big enough to park diesel trucks. My nose would be packed so much that my membranes would just be coming out in my hand, just blood. He also disclosed spending $1,000 daily on the substance, leading to severe nasal damage and bleeding. Initially, Richard was unfamiliar with substance abuse, stating that when he first came into rock and roll, he did not drink or smoke. He did not use it. He did not know anything about it because he had never seen it in his hometown. Yet his life was not solely defined by his substance habits or his extravagant lifestyle. Little Richard also led a deeply complex and unconventional personal life, openly acknowledging his relationships with both men and women. Unlike many artists of his era, he did not shy away from discussing his sexuality, which was fluid and multifaceted. He frequently spoke about his enjoyment of non-traditional romantic arrangements, often encouraging his partners to engage with other men while he watched. One of his most well-known relationships was with a young woman named Audrey Robinson, who later adopted the name Angel. While Richard openly recounted their unconventional experiences, Angel refuted some of his claims, suggesting that his substance use may have clouded his memory or exaggerated certain events. His adult lifestyle stood in stark contrast to his upbringing. Raised in a devoutly religious household, Richard was surrounded by strict moral teachings. His father, a church deacon, and other relatives who were preachers instilled in him a strong sense of faith and discipline. However, as he grew older, he found himself caught between his deeply ingrained religious beliefs and his desires. He was particularly troubled by his same-sex attractions, which he believed were at odds with his faith. This internal struggle became a recurring theme throughout his life, leading him to oscillate between embracing his identity in the music industry and seeking redemption through religious devotion. Despite his attempts to commit fully to a spiritual life, the electrifying world of rock and roll always drew him back. Little Richard's lifelong struggles. There was a time when Richard chose to step away from music to pursue religious studies in college, seeking a deeper spiritual connection and a new path in life. However, even in an academic and religious environment, he struggled to restrain his impulses and navigate his inner conflicts. His time in religious studies was marked by an incident involving a deacon's son, which caused controversy and led to his departure from the institution. Despite these struggles, he attempted to establish himself as a gospel singer, believing that he could merge his passion for music with his faith. Unfortunately, his gospel career never gained the traction he had hoped for, and he eventually found himself drawn back to his former life, one filled with parties, music, and the high-energy celebrity lifestyle that had defined his earlier years in 1975. Richard faced a profound personal tragedy when his brother passed away. Prior to his brother's death, Richard had promised to support him, but instead, he continued prioritizing his social life and career, often caught up in the distractions of fame. When his brother died, he was overcome with immense guilt, feeling as though he had failed to fulfill his responsibilities as a family member. This painful loss prompted him to re-evaluate his choices and once again seek solace in religion. Determined to change his ways, Richard left the music industry and dedicated himself to preaching, aspiring to lead a more virtuous and faith-driven life. He became an ordained minister and spent years spreading messages of hope, redemption, and devotion, further solidifying his complex relationship with both faith and fame. By 1995, Richard appeared to have found a sense of peace within himself. He spoke openly about his belief in a loving and accepting God, expressing a more balanced understanding of spirituality. However, in 2017, he made statements suggesting that he still felt the need for repentance, indicating that his internal struggles were far from over. His lifelong battle between faith and his personal identity remained a central theme in his journey, reflecting the complexities of his character and beliefs. Richard's life also included some perilous moments, such as a severe car accident in 1985 that nearly cost him his life. He crashed into a telephone pole late at night, suffering severe injuries. Firefighters had to use specialized equipment to extricate him from the wreckage. With a broken leg and rib injuries, he spent months recovering. Despite the pain, Richard interpreted his survival as divine intervention, seeing the accident as a sign to continue his renewed spiritual journey. Famous musical native Little Richard was in a car accident this week. Richard was the front seat passenger in a car that was in a crash in Murfreesboro. Although he attempted to distance himself from rock and roll, Little Richard inevitably found his way back to the music scene. His passion for performing was too strong to ignore, and despite his efforts to dedicate himself fully to religion, the lure of the stage always pulled him back. Music had been an integral part of his identity since childhood. No matter how hard he tried to suppress that part of himself, it remained a driving force in his life. However, his return was not without frustration. Richard often expressed disappointment in how the music industry treated him. Despite being a foundational figure in the development of rock and roll, he felt overlooked and underappreciated. He watched as other artists, many of whom had been inspired by his sound and stage presence, received more recognition and accolades than he did. He frequently spoke about the erasure of his contributions, emphasizing that he was among the first artists to bring a flamboyant, energetic style to rock and roll. Determined to secure his legacy, he actively sought acknowledgement, giving interviews, making public statements, and reminding the world of the impact he had on music history. His tireless advocacy ensured that his pioneering role would not be forgotten. Little Richard's passion for performing never waned, even in the face of adversity. Born on December 5, 1932, in Macon, Georgia, he grew up in a large family with 11 siblings. His father Bud was a stern and religious man who also ran a nightclub and sold alcohol illegally. Despite his strict upbringing, Richard was drawn to music from a young age, inspired by gospel singers in church and the rhythm and blues artists he heard on the radio. His flamboyant personality and love for performing set him apart, but his early years were filled with struggles, both personal and professional. During his teenage years, Richard grappled with his sexual orientation. He felt attracted to men but also dated women, conforming to societal expectations that viewed homosexuality negatively. His relationships with women, including his girlfriend Lee Angel and his wife Ernestine Campbell, were complex. While Angel and Campbell did not perceive him as gay, they believed he was overly indulgent in self-pleasure, something Richard admitted to engaging in frequently. He often spoke openly about his struggles with sexuality, a rare and bold stance at the time. His openness about his identity was groundbreaking. In an interview, a host praised him for being one of the first performers to publicly acknowledge his homosexuality, recognizing the courage it took to do so. She remarked that he was very brave, saying she was such a fan and that he was the first performer she could recall ever coming out and saying he was a homosexual. Richard acknowledged the backlash this revelation provoked, stating that everyone got mad at him. One particularly controversial claim involved a supposed encounter with his girlfriend Lee Angel and the renowned singer Buddy Holly, which Richard said he watched. However, when Angel, who was an exotic dancer at the time, learned of this story being shared, she vehemently denied its truth. This only added to the mystique and intrigue surrounding Little Richard's personal life. Beyond his music, Richard's philosophy of life was unique. He believed that everyone possesses both masculine and feminine aspects and encouraged people to embrace their feelings regardless of societal norms. His legacy extends beyond his electrifying performances. He was a pioneer in breaking barriers, both in music and personal expression, as he paved the way for future artists. His impact on the music industry and cultural history remains undeniable. James Brown and Little Richard shared a complex and intriguing relationship early in their careers. While Little Richard was already a well-established star with a hectic performance schedule, James Brown was just beginning to make his mark in the music world. When Little Richard found himself unable to attend all his scheduled shows, he chose an unconventional solution. He asked James Brown to perform in his place, dressed as Little Richard. James Brown took the stage as a substitute, unknown to most of the audience due to his then anonymity. Despite this, Brown's natural talent and showmanship shone through. This arrangement provided him with an invaluable platform to showcase his skills to large audiences and to gain experience from one of the foremost figures in rock and roll. This early opportunity played a significant role in James Brown's subsequent rise in the music industry. In her documentary Little Richard, I Am Everything, filmmaker Lisa Cortez explores an intriguing aspect of Little Richard's career. She discussed at a film festival how Little Richard, overwhelmed by his commitments, often needed someone to perform in his place. James Brown, then less known, was the ideal substitute due to his ability to sing, dance, and match Little Richard's dynamic energy on stage. Little Richard profoundly influenced James Brown. Known for his electrifying performances, vibrant attire, and robust voice, Little Richard left a mark on Brown, who absorbed every aspect of his style. As Brown's fame grew, the impact of Little Richard's mentorship became evident in his performances. Beyond James Brown, Little Richard also inspired numerous other musical icons, including Mick Jagger and David Bowie. While some might credit Elvis Presley as the pioneer of rock and roll, others recognize Little Richard as the true initiator. He described himself as the originator, the emancipator, and the architect of rock and roll, taking pride in the legacy he established. James Brown, known as the Godfather of Soul, never overlooked the significance of his early performances as Little Richard's stand-in. This formative experience was crucial in shaping his career, enabling him to develop his remarkable stage presence. Little Richard's contribution to music was transformative. He not only broke cultural barriers but also infused the rock and roll scene with unparalleled energy, inspiring generations of musicians. His unique style redefined the genre's perception. The relationship between James Brown and Little Richard was more than mentorship, it was a mutual exchange of inspiration, learning, and respect. This bond not only advanced their individual careers but also left a lasting imprint on the music industry. The untold side of Little Richard is explored in the film Little Richard, I Am Everything, which faces criticism for its portrayal of Little Richard as largely overlooked and mistreated by the music industry. It highlights his lack of Grammy Awards, suggesting he was unfairly ignored. However, the Grammy Awards began in 1959, well after many of his major hits, and initially, the awards did not greatly recognize rock and roll compared to genres like jazz and pop. This detail is omitted from the film, leaving its narrative feeling biased. The documentary also paints Little Richard as less recognized than white artists such as Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis, attributing this disparity partly to racial biases within the industry. This is a valid point, as black artists typically received less acknowledgement, yet it overlooks the personal decisions that impacted Little Richard's career. He stepped away from music at the peak of his fame to pursue a life in preaching and encountered challenges in regaining his popularity upon return. This aspect is not unique to him. Many artists, including Elvis, experienced career fluctuations. The film's focus is narrow, failing to address these complexities thoroughly, which weakens its argument. While the documentary successfully initiates a dialogue on Little Richard's significant contributions and the obstacles faced by black and queer artists, it concentrates excessively on portraying him as a victim without adequately delving into his musical achievements or the full scope of his life's choices. Although Little Richard was an extraordinary musician with a profound influence on rock and roll, the documentary, despite its intentions, does not fully honor his legacy. One poignant regret he expressed was wishing he had been more educated to better navigate the music industry and protect himself against exploitative contracts. Little Richard was passionate about music, yet he often faced unfair treatment within the industry. He admitted to lacking knowledge in business matters, describing himself as ignorant and illiterate in that area. Caught up in the thrill of fame, he did not pay close attention to the contracts he was entering. As a result, record companies frequently took advantage of him. Reflecting on his experiences, Little Richard expressed a wish for a different approach. If he had the chance to do it all over again, he stated a desire to be more educated to better safeguard himself against such exploitation. In an interview, he candidly remarked on the overwhelming nature of his earnings. "It was really so much money I did not know what to do with it. It was too much. I would be giving it away, throwing it away. Oh boy, just too many zeros." An illustrative case of the unfair treatment Little Richard faced is seen in his contract for Tutti Frutti, one of his most popular songs. He was paid only 50 cents for each record sold, earning a total of $225,000 for 500,000 copies. While this sum might seem substantial, it was significantly lower than the earnings of white musicians for similar sales volumes. These artists typically received much higher compensation for their records. Furthermore, Little Richard's music was often used commercially without any financial benefit to him. For instance, he once discovered a video of Donald Duck performing Tutti Frutti but received no royalties from it. Frustrated by the ongoing exploitation, he eventually sued several music companies for $112 million in unpaid royalties. This situation was not unique to Little Richard. Many black artists of the time were only given a one-time payment for their songs, depriving them of future earnings from their own work. In contrast, white musicians frequently secured better contracts that provided ongoing income. Despite these challenges, Little Richard took legal action against the unfair practices, culminating in a lawsuit that was settled out of court, though the settlement amount was not disclosed. In a turn of events during the 1980s, Michael Jackson acquired Specialty Records, which held the rights to Little Richard's songs. Jackson later returned these rights to Little Richard, marking a small but significant victory for the artist. What do you think was the awful secret Little Richard kept hidden? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more intriguing content, and do not forget to check out one of the 2 videos popping up on your screen next. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more captivating stories.